You can listen to The Front on your smart speaker every morning. To hear the latest episode, just say, "Play the news from The Australian."
From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Wednesday, September 5. Fresh grief and anger are gripping the Middle East as Hamas shares video of 6 murdered Israeli hostages begging for freedom before they were executed. It's put extra pressure on Israel's PM Benjamin Netanyahu as desperate families of the remaining hostages demand he do more to secure a deal for their return. Brittany Higgins has told a litany of lies about Senator Linda Reynolds, and Linda Reynolds has harassed Brittany Higgins at every turn. Those are the competing claims by barristers in the defamation trial the senator brought against her former staffer. Today, on The Front, how this highly charged trial wound up. Brittany Higgins was a true blue Liberal who wanted the party to win the 2019 election. That's the contention from her senior counsel, Rachel Young, who in the West Australian Supreme Court has laid out in her closing address Higgins's defence against a defamation claim brought by her former boss, Senator Linda Reynolds. We've used voice actors to bring you the words spoken in court.
Ms Higgins, a junior staffer who has long associations with the Liberal Party, has campaigned for them, described Mr Morrison's win as absolute elation. The alleged plan is that she wanted to bring down her senator and that government. We say that will not be found.
But counsel for Reynolds, Martin Bennett SC, said in his closing that in fact Higgins and Shiraz had a visceral hatred for Reynolds, revealed in a 5-hour pre-production meeting for the project, which was played in an earlier federal court defamation trial.
What was said in that 5-hour interview was the genuine, unguarded, unrehearsed, true expression of the motive for what was taking place as part of the planning for a premeditated attack on Senator Reynolds.
Martin Bennett told the court Brittany Higgins' claim in the project interview that she'd been told she would have to wait months to see a counsellor provided by the Employee Assistance Program was not true. Bennett said messages on Higgins' phone showed she had in fact been offered assistance within weeks, but didn't go ahead with the appointment as she'd already engaged a psychologist via a local rape crisis service.
It's just palpably false, and it's not the trauma of a rape victim getting it wrong. It was on her phone.
Bennett said Linda Reynolds had acted properly when confronted with a young woman new to her employment who came to her with a serious allegation.
She did everything she could to ensure that Miss Higgins's principal and most significant allegation that she had been raped by Bruce Lehrman could be properly and fully investigated and prosecuted for a period of virtually 2 years.
Bennett said Reynolds, who has told the court she was deeply distressed by being criticised for her reaction to Higgins' allegation, had refrained from quibbling with aspects of Higgins' story.
Miss Higgins arrogantly, from the sanctity of France, claims the status of the person most seriously affected by this matter and trivialises the hurt to others. We've never sought to trivialise the hurt, the damage that would cause to Miss Higgins, unlike her trivialisation of the hurt caused to Senator Reynolds. The evidence will show that instead of harassing her or challenging the veracity of her rape allegations, Senator Reynolds, at great cost to herself, personally, both physically and mentally, in an act we would describe as quite extraordinary moral courage, kept her promise to never attack Miss Higgins for her obvious lies.
This trial is all about Linda Reynolds' claim that she's been unfairly vilified by Brittany Higgins' claim in social media posts and in media interviews that she was not properly supported. Higgins is running a defence of truth, which means she has to show that, in fact, Reynolds did not support her. Here's how Rachel Young, barrister for Higgins, framed the difference of interpretation between the two women in court on Tuesday.
Senator Reynolds' approach to discharging her duty of care to Ms. Higgins was to invoke Ms. Higgins' agency. Ms. Higgins had no agency when she was raped on the 21st of March 2019 on the couch in Senator Reynolds' private office. She had little agency when, as a 24-year-old recent employee facing deferment in a forthcoming election, met with her boss, her chief of staff, around a table near a couch where she was found undressed when the rape occurred. She had no agency when she started to speak about her experience and was told by the senator that she was not the right person to speak to. She had no agency when she was relocated to Perth for the duration of the election campaign, absent her support network, and being in the awful position of feeling like she wanted to keep her job, but she couldn't talk about her rape.
Young quoted Higgins saying,
"From the outset, I have been driven by my desire to ensure that no other person would have to go through the trauma that I experienced during my time at the Parliament House."
Young said that was the perfect summation of what this trial is all about.
That's why she spoke up. That's what she's been sued about. And that's why we say this action should be wholly dismissed.
Linda Reynolds sued over posts to social media by Brittany Higgins and her husband David Shiraz made early last year. We've used voice actors to bring you some of those posts.
This is from a current Australian senator who continues to harass me through the media and in the parliament. My former boss, who has publicly apologised for mishandling my rape allegation, who has had to apologise publicly after defaming me in the workplace, who had a whole bunch of questionable conduct during my rape trial, who is suing my fiancé for a tweet. This has been going on for years now. It is time to stop.
There is a very real chance Linda Reynolds will be called to court this year to answer questions on her involvement in Brittany Higgins feeling pressured by her office not to continue with a complaint to police. She uploads this to her official website.
Reynolds said her life had been gravely affected, and she alleged Higgins and Shiraz had cooked up a conspiracy to bring down the Morrison government. This saga begins in Linda Reynolds' ministerial suite in the early hours of March 23, 2019. It's there that Brittany Higgins alleges she was raped by her colleague Bruce Lehrmann. He maintains no sexual contact occurred and vehemently denies any wrongdoing. Higgins says she was blackout drunk and only recalls snippets of her return to Parliament House with Lehrmann after they'd been drinking at a bar.
Oh, hi mate. Bruce Lehrmann here with Minister Linda Reynolds. We've been requested to pick up some documents. I've forgotten my pass.
He says he only went back to the office to finish some work, then left to go home alone. The Australian Federal Police eventually charged Lehrmann with rape, and the case went to trial in mid-2022, but it was aborted due to juror misconduct.
Good evening. In an extraordinary turn of events, the rape trial of former Liberal staffer Bruce Lehrmann has been aborted after a juror's misconduct was discovered by a court sheriff.
The former ACT Director of Public Prosecutions, Shane Drumgold, didn't pursue a retrial out of concern for Brittany Higgins' mental health.
I've made the difficult decision that it is no longer in the public interest to pursue a prosecution at the risk of a complainant's life.
In December of that year, Higgins received a $2.4 million compensation payout from the Commonwealth, including about $1.5 million in lost earnings and $400,000 for the distress and humiliation she's alleged to have suffered during her employment. Fast forward about a year, and Lehrmann sued Network 10 and presenter Lisa Wilkinson for defamation. Federal Court Justice Michael Lee found, on the balance of probabilities, Bruce Lehrmann did rape Brittany Higgins on the sofa in Linda Reynolds' ministerial suite. Lehrmann is appealing that finding.
Mr. Lehrmann raped Miss Higgins. I hasten to stress this is a finding on the balance of probability.
Justice Michael Lee also found there was no government conspiracy to cover up the alleged assault.
As we will see, when examined properly and without partiality, the cover-up allegation was objectively short on facts but long on speculation and internal inconsistencies. Trying to particularise it during the evidence was like trying to grab a column of smoke.
And it's now in the WA Supreme Court that Linda Reynolds says she was the target of a conspiracy by Higgins and Shiraz. Coming up, the bit players who've had huge roles in this drama. In her closing address, Rachel Young zeroed in on Linda Reynolds' actions in the days after she found out something had happened in her office. Reynolds has always said Higgins never directly told her she had been raped. But a senior police officer, Leanne Close, gave evidence during the trial that Reynolds had, during a meeting with Close in her office, pointed to the office sofa and said, "It happened over there." Here's what Rachel Young said about that in her closing.
We say you should accept the evidence of Deputy Commissioner Close over the Senator's evidence, which can't be believed. Close had a particular memory of his meeting, contrary to the plaintiff's submission. Deputy Commissioner Close explained that she had not thought it occurred in the Senator's office. She was quite surprised because she did not realise they were talking about a sexual assault in her office and they were sitting in a crime scene. A highly experienced police officer with that kind of memory peg that we were sitting in a crime scene is entirely believable. If there was any suspicion that the activity occurred in her private office, the fact the Senator chose her office for the meeting was problematic. The office was an inappropriate place for a private meeting.
One of the most intriguing characters in this sad drama is Fiona Brown, the former Chief of Staff in Reynolds' office. She's given evidence in the previous federal court trial about her reaction when she learned Higgins and Lehrman had entered Parliament after hours. Brown said she ordered Lehrman to pack up his things and leave the office immediately. She says she could tell Higgins was upset and sent her home for the day, then continued to check in on her and offer to have her work at home, then made arrangements for her to go to Perth to work on the election campaign. Brown told the federal court trial when she realised Higgins was alleging a sexual assault, she walked her down to the police office in Parliament and said she firmly believed it was Higgins' call as to whether to pursue a police complaint. Fiona Brown has said the effect of the whole matter has been to devastate her mental health. Here's what Martin Bennett said in the WA Supreme Court about that on Tuesday. We've used a voice actor.
Miss Higgins would seek to trivialise Miss Brown's trauma as being as a result of public scrutiny, but it wasn't public scrutiny. She was vilified by Miss Higgins. We would say that Your Honour should unhesitatingly accept the veracity of the contemporaneous notes made by Miss Brown. They're fortified by the oral evidence of Senator Reynolds, who was unshaken in cross-examination, vigorous as it was, as to what was supposedly said. And against that, you've got flaky evidence from Miss Higgins that varies over time, and when pressed exactly on that point by Justice Lee, her answers have come woefully short of confirming anything.
Rachel Young's fundamental submission in her closing was that Senator Reynolds had harassed her client.
First, by calling her a lying cow, which was then disseminated widely. 2, by repeatedly backgrounding a journalist by giving her confidential and privileged communications and by giving public interviews undermining Ms. Higgins. And thirdly, by engaging in partisan conduct during the criminal trial of Mr. Lehrman.
That's a reference to Reynolds sending texts to Bruce Lehrman's lawyer during the criminal trial, which was aborted due to juror misconduct. Young said it was also wrong of Reynolds to suggest Higgins should not have been given a $2.4 million settlement from the Commonwealth.
Questioning Ms. Higgins' settlement publicly through the media was harassment of Ms. Higgins.
Justice Paul Tottle will retire to consider his decision. The Australian subscribers have followed this saga second by second, and they'll be the first to know when a result is handed down. Join us at theaustralian.com.au.